All right. Thank you for everybody for joining us again this week. I am with the acclaimed Katharine Wibell.
Wibell, yes.
Wibell, all right. Yes, I got it. And we're going to dive a little bit into storytelling. I've actually got one of your books on my shelf somewhere. And that was a fun little conversation about that book. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive in here?
As you said, my name is Katharine Wibell. I am a high fantasy author, and so far I have 3 different series encompassing 9 books and 16 novellas. I write everything between young adult, new adult, to the adult side of high fantasy, from the light, bright, questing, clean fantasy, isekai for, again, the younger teens, all the way to the grittier, almost from dark side, with my dark retellings of myths.
Excellent. I'm actually playing with something it's a cusp of grimdark.
Ooh.
I was glad that you said something about isekai, because that's something that has been coming up in conversation more. Because I've watched as that genre has just exploded in the last few years. I feel like every other anime I see is isekai now.
Oh yeah.
And what I find fascinating about isekai specifically is that if you go back to like the 80s and before, Alice in Wonderland, the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon series, Chronicles of Narnia, there is that we go to the other world, but the focus is always to come back. And I think it's very interesting of how much the paradigm has shifted, that it's, no, we're in this world now. We're not ever going back to that world, mostly in isekai. And do you have any thoughts on that?
For the change, I think some of the earliest versions that fall into this kind of, and again, they're not exactly, but that portal fantasy, isekai, that blend where someone leaves a world and enters into a totally different reality or world or dimension, has a lot of the earliest forms of literature, from my recollection, were almost for children and young adults. If you think about it, you have Narnia, and you have even Harry Potter, technically, is it, because you go through platform 9 3/4, and
okay.
you leave these realms and enter these new realities. And of course, as fantasy has progressed, it's been more approachable for an older audience. So I think for kids, they like the idea of getting away, but being able to come back home with families and friends, and still coming back, Alice in Wonderland and stuff like that, versus some of our older people, we are okay with some of the grittier stuff of, what if you can't get back? How then are you going to change and survive in your new reality? So I think it just depends on the viewership and how that kind of genre has branched out from, at least in my perspective, more of a younger audience, and now to a wider range of people.
Excellent. So you see it as more of an evolving of the genre, where now it's more of an adult form of storytelling, and there isn't this safety net of always being able to return. My part of the thought process that I've had on it, that it was showing that we're developing, and I don't want to go too deep down the psychology rabbit hole, although we can, of modern escapism, and how there's so much like anxiety about everything in this world, that the idea of just being able to leave it forever and be in this other place entirely, I think, is becoming more appealing overall.
That I can see is true, because there are so many people. Reality is reality, and sometimes it's harder than other times. And I can definitely see that desire to escape the drudgery of the common day aspects, and go somewhere where maybe it's magical, maybe you're flying through the universe in some kind of intergalactic spacecraft, but wherever you're going far away, and just takes you out of the quote-unquote humdrum of a lot of people's lives. Though I'd like to think that people's lives aren't actually all humdrum. I
think there's a lot of adventures to be had, and I think part of that is finding the adventures in the everyday. Like, apparently Leonardo da Vinci would sit and just stare at a river for like hours at a time, while he was just kind of like processing how it moved and what it was doing and what was going on. And I've had some of my fondest memories is just getting lost in the woods with a friend, or walking through a nature trail with my daughter, and us pretending like there's these things out there. So yeah, I think that there's, I mean, we're kind of, I mean, kind of going off here, but yeah, that we can find a lot of magic in the ordinary. In fact, I think that was a lot of what Miyazaki was
Hmm.
portraying in his stories was about, because there's these people have asked about it, these scenes that are a little bit long where, they're just eating or
Yep.
just sitting and taking a bath and this sort of like finding the magic in the ordinary, which I
Hmm.
always thought was pretty fascinating. So I did want to ask, what is one story, film, game that, or something that you came across that just kind of changed the way that you wanted to tell stories, or that was the one that you're like, ooh, I want to do that.
Ooh, well, there's a lot to choose from, but since I'm one of those people that can claim in some way, shape, or form that ever since I was little, I was telling stories and creating characters and backstories and worlds and realities, even though I wasn't necessarily putting them down in words, but just actively telling them. I always kind of thought I was going to be a writer at some point.
Okay.
So earlier on, when, and again, I know I'm not going to say the right or wrong of or the good and bad, I should say, of authors, but I was of the era where Harry Potter came out, and there's a whole bunch of us that love that series. And one of the things that I found so interesting is because I've always loved myths and legends and lore, and learning how much that Rowling pulled from myths and legends to create her world fascinated me because it just made the click that fantasy doesn't have to be all made up stuff. It can incorporate, and actually originally did, was inspired by a lot of myths, but that was that first oh wow moment for me growing up that I was like, oh, that's neat. I kind of want to do that. Pull my, fantasy from earlier myths and legends and lore and let that be my inspiration. Yet, the other thing I will say would be Yu-Gi-Oh! And because growing up watching that show was one of the first times that I really was exposed to in my early years the concept that villains were dimensional and had backstories, and the heroes weren't always heroic, even though more in that show more often not they were. But I love the idea that the villains weren't just black and white, because up until that point a lot of villains, taking case Disney villains, were more I am here to rule the world, I'm here to conquer, I'm here to be evil for evil's sake. And so that was like one of
Twirling
those
their mustache.
yeah, those early on wow moments. I was like, ooh, that's cool. And again, that's just basic, I think, for a lot of people growing up and learning those things. But for me, those two moments were those little sparks of wow, how can I use that to change the way I tell stories?
And one of the I'm a big fan of myths and folklore myself. Is I like I'll be watching something or some big name franchise will come up and like, oh, that creature is actually from like this background, like a boggart.
Mhm.
The boggarts were basically just boogeymen. Like that was
Yep.
another name for the boogeyman in Britain. If you've ever played, have you played Skyrim?
I have not, but I know a number of people who have, yes.
Okay, the Draugrs.
Yep.
Every crypt you
Yep.
go in, there's the Draugrs, and that is a
Oh yeah.
Viking story. Oh, it's in your
But my Nordic series, since they're from Old Norse. So
okay. So
mhm.
is there a Draugr in there?
Oh yeah, I actually on the special edition covers for the omnibus collection, one whole book. Let me see if I can bend back. I'll bring it up here. Is actually the characters going through a essentially this forest full of Draugr. So you can kind of see the Draugr actually coming and trying to attack the characters in that
There we
book series.
are. Okay. All right. So if you're looking for Draugrs, folks, that's the
There you
book
go.
for you.
But yes, pulling from lore has been just kind of fascinating. And anytime you watch something or read something or exposed to something, and then you learn the backstory of that, you're like, wait, that's neat. That came from where? What?
Oh yeah, and I mean, there's some fascinating lore out there. Like the Anku, if you're familiar with that one, it's an old English, it's death, but he pushes this cart down the road.
I don't
And
know if
when
I'm,
you
I know that one yet.
huh?
I said, I don't know if I know that one. I'm going to write that one down. Wait, hold on. Anku?
Anku, Ankou.
Oh, I'm going to maybe put that one in one of my myth based series.
There you
Okay.
go. Or that
Right?
the headless horseman is a species sort of called the Dullahan, which is
Ah,
an Irish
mhm,
legend. I could
mhm.
do this all day. We yeah,
It's
myth and
fun.
folk. And those are just the ones that like come up the top of my head. You have I think it's either the Tengu or the Gobaki. It's a yokai. Tengu is like a raven thing. The Gobaki is a goblin, but they'll have like wrestling matches with people.
Yeah.
So like the idea of like you're walking down the street and you're accosted by some creature, like, oh no, it's gonna eat me. Like, no, 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 we're throwing down. We're gonna wrestle right now.
Well, the word nightmare comes from the nightmare, which was a giant black horse that would come and its presence would cause you to have bad dreams.
Yeah,
So that came from a creature.
yeah. It's interesting how our culture and our storytelling is so immersed in it in ways we don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
Another fun rabbit hole is like reading about Jinn,
Yeah.
because in video games, if free are always fire based, but
Yeah.
in the lore they can be any element.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they can even be a sandstorm. Gosh, I feel like we could have like a whole series of different discussions here.
Yes.
Let's see. Where okay, well, the next question was going to be, where do you find inspiration for your stories or creative projects?
Well, a lot of times from mythology, but not always. Like my, it worked well. But honestly, inspirations come from so many things. I do love retellings of myths and legends, and of course, my true fantasy series pull from a lot of that. But I've had my debut series came from a dream. My YA series was the whole multiverse that my sister and I developed during our imaginary play as children. Of course, we didn't know what multiverse was at the time. We just
Right.
knew what we were doing. And so inspirations can come from pretty much anything, whatever just gives you that spark. I have a future one, a book I'm working on right now, writing the first draft, and it was inspired because I wanted to write a world around a character I developed for D&D. So it can come from anywhere.
Vin Diesel years ago, I don't think the movie did very well, sadly, but he got to live out every D&D nerd's fantasy. I think it was called Witch Hunter or something like that. But it was apparently a movie based on his D&D character.
Ah, I did not know the backstory for that movie.
Yeah, and I was just like, that's fantastic. It's. But again, I don't think it did very well. But he got to live the dream right there.
Everybody has to have their dream, and you know what? That would be fun to see. Your characters come alive in some way. So that is neat.
Let's see. What is an unexpected or difficult challenge you have encountered in your creative endeavors, and how did you end up tackling it?
Difficult challenge. Well, honestly, I guess from the get-go, when I started my publishing journey and writing journey years ago, there wasn't a lot of resources, or definitely not as many and as accessible resources for people who are going to go publish indie. And that's how I'm an independently published author.
Yeah, that's changed a lot in the last several years.
Yeah, and so when I was doing it, it was more of I was stumbling and doing everything wrong the first time because I didn't know who to ask, what to ask, and where to go. So it was a lot of figuring out and kind of like just feeling my way through the dark. And because of that, a lot of oopsie daisies where afterwards I had to like amend things, change things, revamp the cover, realize that, oh yes, I have to market books. I can't just publish them and let people find them because that's not the way of the world.
I wish. Yeah.
So I think a lot of that was learning. And one of the best things that I have figured out is to resolve that is building a community of other writers, of other authors, because if you have that nice mix of people who are advanced stages, people who are just coming up, we're all talking, we're all sharing things. The writing community, in my experience, is very welcoming and warm. And so you're learning so much just that way. And so that's why I like to share information with other people. I love talking about don't do this things. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you probably not that.
What not to do. Right. Well, and the thing is, I think we continuously refine our process too. Every book that you complete, you're like, oh, I could have done this so much easier had I done X, Y, and Z. You've got more books down than I do, so I feel like you've got this process down at this point.
The process is always changing. Never say that. Tomorrow I'll wake up and it'll be all different again.
Well, that's a little bit of relief on my end. Also terrifying at the same
Yep.
time. So,
Yep.
let's see. World building. What are some like fun ways that some fun things you like to do when world building? What are some sort of immersive or interactive things that you've played around with in that
One
avenue?
of my things, and again, the project I'm writing right now will be the first book in a progression style dark fantasy D&D meets Witcher vibes, and building up to it, knowing that I was finishing a couple other projects and other series, but knew that was where I wanted to go. I have a readers group, and so I challenge them every year around the same time in the fall and we'll help co-create a creature, a monster, so to speak, that I will be putting in that series. And so for the last 3 years, every year we did this whole cooperative process where we go through and figure out the environment, how it thinks, how it interacts. Is it social? Is it, solitary? What it looks like, the abilities, if it has anything, magical properties of it. And we go through this process over a course of definitely a few months. And by the
Okay.
end, create this creature that for me, I will put into my future series, but then I also gift them a short story that features that book as a thank you. And so for me, it's great because it allows me with this raw world to be able to say, okay, now I know I have this creature, this is the environment. Where would that fit in this world's geography? And then how do I route my characters in order for at least one of them to come in contact with said creature in that first book?
Oh
So
wow.
it's been a fun challenge. It was just a new way to approach writing the story, but it was a great way to help me kind of kickstart that literal world building of said world, because I was just staring at a map outline and I was like, so what goes where? How do I do this?
That's fun. So that's a D&D group that you get together with and you sort of
Oh no,
invent your.
this is a readers group
Oh,
on
okay.
Facebook. So the people who like to follow me and be a little more active in my stuff, that's one of our interactive things we do annually.
That is fantastic. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right, where are we now? What are some techniques that you have used to resolve writer's block, to get over the dreaded writer's block?
Well,
Or what?
fortunately, here's where I have to knock on wood. I have not hit the traditional form of writer's block as of yet. That will eventually change. It gets all of us at some point, I feel. But for me, I have had moments where I've been working on a book and for whatever reason, it's just not jiving right now. And
Uh-huh.
and I'm, getting bogged down and it's like pulling teeth trying to just get through the story, even though I know where I'm supposed to go. And in those circumstances, what I do is I'll put that project to the side and then do what I work on what I call a palette cleaner and write a totally different story.
Okay,
And that
okay.
will just allow me to step away long enough and kind of refresh myself that I'm like, okay, I can write, I can do this. It makes me feel better. It doesn't matter if it's a short story, a novella, a full length, but it's just like, okay, I can do this. Then I go back. And hopefully by that point, I've given it enough time to kind of mellow out and approach it again with new and fresh eyes. So that's how I kind of keep things going. Even though I may not be writing that one book, I kind of jockey between several projects.
Okay. No, I've done the same as well. And oddly enough, the Cohen brothers do that. So
Yeah.
when they start writing something and they get stuck, they'll jump and start writing another screenplay. And then when the juices start kicking again, they come back and finish that. So there's a couple of different screenplays that they were half finished with one, jumped to another one, went back, made that movie, came back, finished this half finished screenplay. That was sort of the palate cleanser, as you
Mm-hmm.
put it. That's a lot of fun. Now I know you've talked a little bit about this and you mentioned it earlier, but I feel like you have a unique answer to this. Can you share a moment from your life that inspired a scene, character, or creative choice in your work? And I know for you, you have a real life experience that informed like a whole, like at least one book, if not a saga.
Wait, I'm trying to see which way you were trying to approach that one. But
Oh,
um,
you don't have to talk about that one. I mean, it's, dealer's choice.
well, I was gonna say, okay. Well, my thing was like, I'm trying to figure out like which one you were referring to. But for my YA series, again, that one was inspired by this kind of interactive imaginary play my sister I did
That's it.
over
Yep.
years of just being kids running around the rural countryside of Georgia, and it was this thing that we originally had just to be fun, and we created our alter egos and we pulled in all our passions and everything. So the flavors of, again, going back, I'm a child of the 90s, Yu-Gi-Oh, Beast Machines, Dragonheart, Stargate SG-1, the list goes on and on and on, Jackie Chan Adventures, everything that we were just all about. Yeah,
no one remembers that cartoon. I know exactly.
It was so good.
It was great.
And you have like all these kind of things mixed in and pulled in these like different flavors, and we create this essentially, again, this multiverse. Didn't know the term at the time, but that was just a lot of fun. And I realized, even when I was kind of more or less that age, that I wanted to share that with people because it was so much fun. It was very vibrant. We had all these villains and backstories and characters that all interacted throughout these worlds. And so because of that, that was the reason why I wanted to become a writer, because I wanted to tell that story. Though, lo and behold, of course, I wait years and just kind of thinking about this, play around with the idea for a while, but realized that because it became essentially my passion project, I didn't want to start off with that book. I didn't want to do it and then fail. So I waited around until I had another idea for what was supposed to be a standalone book, and ended up being a 4-book series.
Yep.
But that other series allowed me to get my footing, learn my writer's voice, figure out the whole publishing industry, kind of fumble my way through marketing until I was ready to go back and finally start writing my YA series. So we have 5 books out right now, and the 6th one will hopefully be released by the end of the year for that series.
So how many books will there be total in that series?
Depending on how it breaks, I'm feeling it's going to be 8, but there is definitely another thing where I may have a spin-off alternative ending, which could be either a novella or full length, which would make 9. So we'll see.
All right. And my mind went completely blank. I had a follow-up question and now it's gone. Let's see.
Jackie Chan Adventures. That always does it.
What strategies do you use to keep your stories engaging throughout, avoiding sagging middles and rushed endings?
And that's part of that craft of learning how to do appropriate pacing, because there is, especially earlier writers do kind of struggle with that middle and then how to wrap up. I've always been one where it doesn't matter if the book's a little slower or one that's just action, action, action. You do have to find that balance in between to make sure, people, if you're a high action book, don't get numb by the action. So you're trying to find balance, and the vice versa. If you have a slower book, to make sure you give something that hooks the reader. One of my tricks, and I know it's one that people either love or hate, is I typically end chapters on cliffhangers because I want them to get into the next chapter. And for me, that also allows me to kind of figure out where a good place to break the story, line to make sure it's interesting. Now, up until recently, all my book series have followed just a single POV character throughout the storyline. So trying to figure out and make sure it's active and engaging has been, depending on the book, a little challenging or not. But the one I'm working on is the first time I'm doing a giant cast of POV characters, 9 POVs you'll get. And so every time I break, it's kind of fun for me because I break on like a moment, but I have to make sure it's entertaining enough that people are wanting to get back to it between all these other chapters with other characters kind of sandwiched in. So I have to up the ante for those endings. On the other hand, it's a lot of fun because people have to wait longer because they can't just flip the next page. They're like, oh no, we jumped to this other character. Wait, I do want to know what's happening. So it's one of those kind of fun things.
Yeah, there was a video I'd watched recently where this storyteller was talking about the concept of ma in Japanese storytelling. Are you familiar with this?
No, I'm not.
So apparently Akira Kurosawa would borrow it, and so did Miyazaki. So ma is kind of like the calm before the big moment. And so it can happen in a lot of different ways, but in Seven Samurai, because there's been several battles leading up, before the big climactic battle with the bandits and the Seven Samurai, there's this scene where it's just rain falling on the rooftops and filling up the buckets. And, people kind of asked about it, but it was one, I felt like it kind of built the tension a little bit of like
Yeah.
we're getting ready for this fight, but also what Kurosawa said is that this is reminding us what they're fighting for. The village,
Mm-hmm.
seeing the villagers, seeing all the different parts of the village that we haven't really like focused on throughout the previous scenes because of all the action. And that, action, 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 if that's all it is, it starts to become baseline. It starts to get boring almost if
Yeah.
it's just fight after fight after fight. So having those moments of like reflection and pulling back, uh there should be a question there. What's
I was going to say it does. It gives it again that balance, and that's the thing about pacing. It's to keep people entertained. You want to have that right pacing between those high action or intensely emotional moments versus something that's a little more subtle but still integral to the story.
No, we had mentioned marketing a little bit earlier and how much the landscape has kind of changed overall. Is there any, because I know I've talked to a lot of authors, and I thought I was the only one until heard other authors like, gosh, if I could only just write
Yes,
books and not have to
that's
worry
the
about marketing.
lovely.
And I was like, oh, okay, so it's not just me.
No.
Um, have you found there to be any sort of resources that have come up lately that you find to be, a little bit user friendly for newer writers, or that have, made it easier for them to get their work out there in front of people?
Well, when it comes to the marketing and advertising side, one of the biggest and best resources, and I can only assume that maybe this has been mentioned before, but maybe not. But if you have access to Facebook, and I know everybody's social media is here or there, maybe you don't have it. But if you're trying to be a writer, you need to be on at least a platform. So if you are on Facebook, there is one called 20 Books to 50K, and it is a huge community of authors, especially on the indie publishing side, and it is chock full of every resource imaginable when it comes to the marketing and advertising side. So you could spend months just perusing and getting into that.
Oh, wow.
But it's a great one to answer questions and learn there. And they're also the group that originally put on what has become the world's biggest indie convention in Vegas, which was 20 Books 50K Vegas, now has been rebranded to Author Nation, and that happens every fall. So that's a great resource. But if you are also writing out, and again, depending on what you're financially capable of, going to writers' conferences can be great because not only you can network with other people, and networking is arguably as important as going to the seminars and sessions, but
Oh, yeah.
there is so much you can learn from, again, the craft side to the marketing side and advertising, going to those things. So if you're new and trying to figure your way out, consider going to some kind of, if you have that ability, writers conference. But online, there's a free resource, 20 Books to 50K, and that's a great one.
So,
And I'll put one more out. One more
oh,
out
yeah.
there. Shout out for those Discord users and gamers, a little more gamer forward. There's Indie Author Connect on Discord, and they're also a great resource for independent authors. And they have connections where they have vetted cover designers and formatters and editors and all that there, so people can go and meet and connect when you're in the search for those things.
Well, and also when you meet people at different, writers meetups, writers guilds, and things like that, they have Discord chats of their own.
Mm-hmm.
So, getting involved with your local community, they might have a Discord going on, and like one I found it when I was in Scotland, another one I found down here on the Gulf Coast. So yeah, there's a lot of miniature resources, but you find them through going to these events, talking to other
Mm-hmm.
authors, getting to know them. Like you and I ran into each other at Con Possible,
Yeah.
and started up a dialogue.
And that's another thing is like if you like going to fan based cons, be it something small like we were at Compossible, or something big like Comic Con, or where I'm from is Dragon Con. A lot of those places also have writing tracks. I know there's a lot of flashy, you
Yeah.
get to meet the stars and do the things, but and of course cosplay, but a lot of them have writers tracks. And guess where you're going to find writers there, and great resources there, not just again the panelists and seminars, but again building that connection with community.
Let's see. Where am I? Are there Are there storytelling questions you from other writers that you feel passionate about answering? Is there a question that you get that you would like to kind of, go more into detail here? Or is there a question you have wanted somebody to ask and they just never ask it? And
Why do you do what you do? No. Um,
what is wrong with you?
exactly. Do you really have to talk with all those people in your head? Yes, the answer is yes. No, I mean, honestly, my two favorites we already kind of covered, which is like dealing with the writer's block and marketing. But one of the questions that I think is very valuable for people who are especially trying to get to the point of releasing their first book uh, is what is one thing an author wishes they knew before they started their journey. And
Mm.
for me, one of my favorite things, and again, I'm a little more on the marketing side because without marketing, I would not be selling books, but is start your platform early. And platform is any place that people follow you. So again, going back that you don't have to be on all the social media, you don't have to build things, but pick 1 to 2 that you want to be present on, that you like, and it works just the way that you vibe with, and start building your community even before you publish. You could say, hey, I'm a writer. I wrote a chapter today. You can talk about maybe the biggest pitch for your book. You don't have to go into details, don't necessarily need to spoil the plot of your story, but people are fascinated with you and what you're doing and your achievements. And even sometimes if you have pitfalls, they're there to help you and communicate with you and be with you. And so by the time you're ready to publish a book, you have this community of potential readers already there. And
Yeah.
so you will be better off than I did, which again, I just dropped my book, walked away for 2 years, came back and was like, why aren't you doing anything?
Right, right. Why is nobody buying my book?
Yes. And even
Nobody
if you
knows
make
about
all
it.
mistakes, you can still be successful because that book ended up being an international bestseller and has had like 7 awards and all this stuff. So it can happen. It's just marketing is important, unfortunately.
Now, this is a question I get asked in that vein, and I maybe you have a better answer than I do, but like, how do you kind of juggle, your marketing, your editing, your writing, time wise, and then the follow up question is, how do you kind of pick which platforms to focus on? But let's hit that one first. How do you pick which platforms to focus on? And I mean, do you just kind of pick your favorite and then have ancillaries, or you try to be, what's kind of a good formula for that?
Well, what a good formula and what I've done are two different things. Now, again, I did everything wrong, which was try to jump on everything. But again, every person is going to be very different. If you're visual, maybe Instagram works better. If you're comfortable with on screen, TikTok and YouTube. And again, you have to figure out what makes sense for you and where you want to be. The rule of thumb, unfortunately, is though there are some authors out there that can get away with not showing your face because there's so many people who want to make sure they are dealing with a real person and not, an AI bot. You do need to,
Yeah,
even if it's a still frame of your photo of you posting, you need to be there somewhere. And
get a
so for
headshot.
me, one of my favorite places is Book Talk right now, and it still has been. I know it's been changing, and the algorithm has been up and down because of the buyover and everything. But so far, it's still my favorite. Again, that could change, but that's just one because I'm able to easily engage with readers and authors there, at least in a way that makes sense to me. Now, beyond that, I am on a lot of places, but for what I would recommend, again, pick what works for you, master it. If you're comfortable and you do think you have more time, you can jump somewhere else. One of my favorite things to do is work smarter, not harder. So if I'm making videos on TikTok, I'm sharing them over the next few days on all my other
Right.
platforms. If I'm doing still shots on Instagram, I'm going to counter and share all those carousels and posts backwards. And so again, I'm trying to maximize when I'm taking the energy and time to do something that I get the most benefit out of it.
Understood. And then that second part was, I said it out loud a little bit ago. Oh my gosh. I've got a newborn. I feel like I should say that. So a little bit
It's okay. It's
scattered.
okay.
Yeah, juggling. So time juggling, because I mean, I've heard, people say, try to write 1,000 words a day, 3 pages a day, 5 pages, but between that and your editing and your marketing, have you found a groove that works for you, or do you have any recommendations of how to kind of schedule yourself out between your writing, your editing, and your marketing? And I'm probably forgetting something in there.
Yeah, I was going to say, it all depends on where you are in your publishing cycle. And if you are writing one book, going through the whole process before writing another book, or if you're like me, who has like 8 different projects at different stages going on. Again, don't recommend it. It's just what I do. But when it comes to time management, obviously a writer can't be a writer without writing. So writing should still be your forefront. And
All right. So what was the last thing we said?
we were talking about time management. And
That's it.
so I know I was mentioning somewhere around the time when it was got cut off every moment there, but the fact that you can't be a writer without writing. So you do have to make that a priority. And I think, and I know I fall into that scenario of there's so many other things we are supposed to be doing that sometimes we're looking and doing and trying all the everything else, maybe marketing, maybe editing, maybe trying to figure out advertising, all the things but writing. So honestly, you really need to make sure you do have time for writing. And again, each person's going to be different. I can't say that enough, that someone may only have 30 minutes a day. Someone else can squeeze a couple hours. Someone can take a whole weekend, or or is potentially retired or whatever, or works at home and can like pull together more time. So you have to look what you have available, and again say writing is the most important thing. Make sure you have a schedule. If that means writing 30 minutes every day, great. That's what you do. And then from there, if you are able to do other things, marketing probably would be very important, but so are all the other aspects. So you have to figure out your schedule of how you're moving forward. If you're at an editing stage, when it's at an editor, you can maybe working on either blocking out the next book, or creating some videos or posts for what you're going to be promoting your book for going forward. You just have to make that time work for you. But writing's the most important part, and the others, you just have to take them value what you need to do. I know some authors that say as soon as a book comes back from an editor, they block everything in out, they try to do all the edits, and then they go back to their normal, I write a little bit, I do some marketing, I write a little bit, do some marketing. So you just have to figure out what makes sense. I know another author who takes a week on and just writes, and then the next week is marketing. And they do this.
That's disciplined. I don't think I could do that.
Again, you just have to figure out what makes sense for you. But what you don't want to do is get caught up in, I feel like I need to be posting, I feel like I need to send a newsletter, I feel like I need to be doing this engagement, I feel, and then not writing, because writers can only be a writer if you write. So
right
exactly. Right.
Another a marketer friend of mine also had highly recommend batching tasks. So maybe like try and create a whole lot of content at once, and then slowly disseminate it throughout their portfolio of the menagerie of social media now.
Yep. Mondays and Fridays are my media days. So that's what I usually do, is batch as much as possible. Not to say that periodically something will come up and I'll like create a video or a post midweek, but yeah, typically Mondays and Fridays, I definitely set some time out just to help batch posts, so then I can schedule them or have them just ready in the wing for later date.
Excellent. Well, I do thank you so much for your time. Well, do you have any last minute thoughts that you'd like to share?
Well, I guess in general, if anybody is interested in the writing community, of course, I've thrown a few resources out there, but always feel free to say hi to me if you see me on anything, because as I mentioned, I'm on way too many platforms. Again, do as I say, not as I do, but you're welcome to say hi to me.
Also, I'll get your links for this, and we'll put that in the description of the video. So if you want to, be able to follow Katharine and her menagerie of work, you'll be able to find her online.
Yay.
All right. Any send offs?
Outside of that, I mean, my typical send off is happy reading, but for anybody who's in the Georgia area, and especially towards the end of this month on the 28th, which is Saturday, if you are around Smyrna, there is a location called the Viking Alchemist Meadery. Yes, I said
Sounds
mead.
delicious.
And it will be an event, a 1 day book fair called Book Flood. I will be there, probably dressed as a Viking, selling some of my Viking books among all my others, and drinking mead. So you can come out and say hi to me over there.
Huzzah. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and everybody have a great day.
Bye.